You might remember, although I wouldn't expect you to remember, that I did a video on the 21st of January to say that I'd been defrauded. And this is the outcome of that story. So initially, I received 3 chargebacks for my website, BlackBeltBarrister.com, on which I provide exclusive content explaining the civil procedure rules, techniques of how to do evidence in chief cross-examination, either for those that are interested in going to law school, bar school, or just generally interested in learning the skills of a barrister, or learning their way around the rules, the civil procedure rules, to go to court. And many people, I'm humbled to say, have emailed me with thanks and gratitude that my courses, my videos, both exclusive there and here on YouTube, have helped them to win their case. So, as I say, this is the outcome to that story, because I challenged these 3 chargebacks, because this individual had paid for 7 months and then claimed that they lost their card and therefore didn't authorize the transactions. Now, make no mistake, that was a dishonest and therefore fraudulent declaration to his card company, because it was an ongoing authorization, meaning you authorize it, you set it up, which was what we call 3D secured, meaning he must have the card, he has the details, the security code, all of his personal details, and either authenticates the payment through his banking app or receives a code to his mobile phone or on the telephone or whatever it might be, depending on how his bank works. But he authenticates that payment. Now, the way this works with ongoing transactions and authorizations is that the initial payment is authorized using 3D Secure, and therefore if you use a service such as Stripe, which I do because it's just one of the neatest around, not an endorsement, it's just something I genuinely use, but if you authorize, or rather the customer authorizes the initial transaction using 3D Secure, then that is guaranteed. So if they then say it was fraudulent, then it's just not accepted because it was secured, as in they've authenticated the transaction. But the subsequent transactions do not benefit from this same protection, and they go through the normal chargeback dispute procedure. And so they raise a chargeback to say either not as described or not provided if it's a product or something like that, or that they didn't authorize the transaction. For example, they've lost their card, or their card's been stolen and it's been used without their authorization, which is pure fraud. And I think in my 20-something year business career, I've only had a handful of those genuine cases. One, many years ago, there was essentially a gang operating on the other side of town who used a stolen card from somehow some lady in Japan, and that was a genuine fraud. But this was not one of those cases. This was the customer being fraudulent in their chargeback declaration. So what they did was to say that they lost their card and therefore did not authorize these 3 payments and therefore wanted them recalled. Now, the system working the way that it does, a chargeback is not a legal process. It is just a policy process between card issuer and merchant. The merchant being a trader such as myself, taking payments. The merchant services such as Stripe acquire the money, so they are the acquirer, and they acquire the money from the card issuer, and that's how it works. And so there's an agreement between them. So if the card holder files a chargeback with their bank, their card issuer, which is not always the same people, if they file a chargeback and they sign a declaration, that's a really important point. They sign a declaration to say that this is true, which could come back and bite them later, as this customer might find out. They sign a declaration to say that this is true, i.e. they've lost their card, if that's what they declare, and therefore didn't authorize the transactions. That's what this customer did. However, that was obviously not true, because the initial payment, the first 4 payments, starting with the initial one that was 3D secured, were not recalled via chargeback because they couldn't, because they were out of time, because most banks have got, I think it's 90 days. Some I think have 120 days. I think most is 90 days within which you can file a chargeback for a transaction. So the first 4 of which he couldn't recall, the final 3 were within time. But the original one was 3D secured. So I go back and fight all of these three transactions for several reasons. One is that the original transaction was 3D secured, so he couldn't have lost the card because he obviously had the PIN number sent to his phone and so on. Now, I suppose it is technically possible somehow. I'm sure there are many of you in the comments who are absolute experts in your field. Now, many years ago, I did go off and study computer science, but that was many years ago. So some of you in the comments might tell me that it is technically possible and not absolutely ruled out. But it's not a reasonable doubt that they did authenticate it, given what I'm about to tell you. So not only was it 3D secured, but they even participated in the Q&A section on my website. So I've now deleted those, so there's much reduced or eliminated risk of people knowing who it is. But they participated in the Q&A section, which I have, where people can ask general questions about the rules and general questions, not legal advice. Obviously, it's not designed to be a replacement for legal advice, and nor should it be. If you wanted legal advice, you should go and seek formal legal advice. But people do ask general questions. How does this rule apply? What does this mean? And how do I do this and how do I do that? Generally. And that's perfectly fine. But this individual did start to ask very specific questions about an ongoing litigation. And I did respond to say, well, generally an example wording might be XYZ, because that's fine. That's a general example. They then obviously weren't satisfied with my response because it wasn't specific enough, because it's not going to be specific enough if it's not designed to be legal advice. If it's designed to be general Q&A and guidance, it is not going to be absolutely tailored to their specific circumstances. So they came back again and said, let me put it this way. And then they set out, this is exactly what I'm trying to do. This is the situation. This is where we are in the litigation. This is what I want. And so my response, whilst being helpful still, also said that they might need to seek legal advice because a generic answer shouldn't be relied upon as legal advice, because it can't be. I mean, a general response to a general question simply cannot be shoehorned in as legal advice. So that was that, or so I thought, until they filed these chargebacks for 3 months. So I suspect that they realized that they weren't going to be able to hoodwink me into giving free legal advice or advice on the back of what is supposed to be a generic Q&A on my website, which obviously it is not designed to do, and therefore felt disgruntled and therefore wanted to recall the payments. Now, so I supplied all of the evidence to my merchant, who in turn provided it to the card issuer, to say they've accessed the website. This is the IP address from which they've accessed it, and these are all the details. This is how many times they've accessed it. Here's the Q&A post, which we've exchanged conversation, all of which proof that they've in fact used the website and the service, together with the original 3D secure authentication, which essentially proves that they've authenticated the transaction and the subsequent transactions were going forward. Now, they also logged into the website to cancel the membership there and then to prevent further payments, and then contacted the card issuer to recall those 3 payments. So what they said, and here's the really important bit, which is dishonest and frankly illegal. It's a criminal offense. What they'd done is declared that these transactions were fraudulent, in that they certified that they deny authorizing or participating in the disputed transactions, which of course is not true. And so, having provided the information to the merchant, who then provided it to the card issuer, who then investigated it, and obviously their card issuer has access to the rest of their account and they've looked through everything else. And the conclusion of that investigation, which takes several weeks, was that there was compelling documentary evidence to prove that the cardholder was in possession of the card and or using the merchandise or services provided. And so the card issuer accepted the challenge, returned the money, and the merchant Stripe, in this case, returned the money to me, but not without charging me £20 per transaction that was disputed, even though they were resolved in my favour. Now, whilst I think that's a bit unfair, I don't hold it against Stripe because they do have to deal with a number of these transaction disputes and they have to recoup the cost somehow. Otherwise, it's all for free because ultimately they're not being paid to deal with those disputes with the very small percentage, albeit a percentage that adds up over time, to deal with these disputes. So whilst I do think it's unfair to me to have to pay those fees, it's justified from Stripe's point of view. So that's swings and roundabouts. So I don't hold that against Stripe. I do hold that against the individual. Now, on the one hand, it's not really worth me chasing this down to court for £60 because it's just more time and effort than it's worth. Even though I would win absolutely hand down, slam dunk, it's as crystal clear as it would need to get for a court to rule on this. It is, however, worth me doing this video to you to explain how all this works. So if you find yourself in that position, you need to challenge these things, then you know how to. And so you would need to issue a letter of claim so that you are in a position to be able to file a claim if you need to. And then you would probably file it online. It's the quickest, easiest, cheapest way of doing it, and just set out, here's what happened, here's why they owe me the money, and here's what I claim, and etc. And it will go through very easily and you can follow the process. I've got several videos dealing with how to run claims just like that. But what I will do in this case is report it twofold. I will send a very brief note to the police because this is consumer fraud, in that he's made a false declaration with a view to make a gain to himself and a loss to me, which is fraud. It's the very definition of fraud. And I'll consider reporting it to CFAS, which is a database of people that commit fraud. And if somebody gets placed on that CFAS database, it can have all manner of consequences, such as all of their banks could choose to close their account forthwith and they'll struggle to get an account ever again. So that is something I would consider doing as well. Let me know in the comments if you think I should take that nuclear step over what is ultimately a very nominal, small amount of money. But if he's doing that with me, he's doing it with others. On the balance of probabilities, he's doing it with others, and other people will suffer, and other people may not know how or have the wherewithal to challenge these things as I can and do. And so should somebody get away with that? Let me know what you think in the comments. If this is worth just dropping or whether it is worth a short note to both the police and CFAS. Interested in your thoughts on that one, because that doesn't take much time at all. It's an email, it's a referral, and dare I say it, coming from me, they will probably look at it. And so with that, it is sort of a win-lose scenario in that overall, my balance sheet will be positive from this individual because they paid 7 payments altogether, and I got the 3 back that they disputed, although I've had to pay 3 lots of fees because they disputed the transactions. And it's open to me to claim against them for the 60 odd pounds for those fees, whether it's worth it or not. But it is also open to me to refer it to the police and to CFAS, and ultimately allowed me to make this video for you so that if you are in this position and you have a difficulty and you need to deal with it, you want to deal with it, and you want to stand on principle and deal with the thing, that you've got my guidance here. Not legal advice, but guidance. So I hope you found that useful. It's sort of a, like I say, it's sort of a win-lose scenario for me at the end of this one. But I thought you might find it interesting. I thought it might help you, and that's what I'm here for. And so over 2,000 something videos and 4 years, I've just passed 400,000 subscribers. So thank you all so much. So please do subscribe and keep that count going. And I'm just approaching 100 million views. So that's quite a thing. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.